Genshin storytelling was always in a weird spot, and I managed to find certain flaws that I would like to share with you. And with that being said, hello and welcome. I'm Lorgor, and today I'd like to talk about flaws in Genshin storytelling. But before we will get into it, I'd like to mention something. We all know that Genshin is children's game. It is always perceived that way because of bright colors, simplistic events and things of that nature. But the story isn't made like that. The story is much darker than what would you get in your average children game. First, I'd like to make a comparison between Genshin Impact and Avatar: The Last Airbender. This show and this game are both aimed especially for children, but the story in there is very much dark. It isn't Diablo dark, but it has some kind of darker feel. For example, shortly after the show started, we are shown that Aang had to witness the deaths of his friends and family after Fire Nation destroyed his home. And the show doesn't really take any chances to make it easier, as the stakes in the show is very much seen across it. And in Genshin, you can see some of these dark themes as well. For example, Raiden and her Vision Hunt decree, or the time loop and everything with Nahida, or the end of Fontaine. It all just feels like it's not for children. Children will not understand what is actually going on. That's for the older audience. They can feel it. They can see that these stories have some kind of impact. Although the impact in Genshin's case isn't as severe as in Avatar's case, I would say. And with that being said, I'd like to present to you numerous storytelling flaws I found in Genshin. At the beginning of the game, we are told to search for our sibling. Yet, we didn't know back then that our sibling is actually our enemy. We just found out about this a bit later. We are constantly on a journey with Dainsleif to find our sibling and what is actually Abyss. Yet this story is told in a very unfortunate manner. We are getting one piece of puzzle every single year, and by this point it is both tiring and difficult to keep up with everything that actually is happening. Our, let's just say, kind of side stories include going to those nations and to find what is actually happening in those nations and helping them, which kinda should mirror the journey Dainsleif took with our sibling. Yet it feels like it's pretty much aligned to us and it doesn't really have this amazing journey as it should have. And I believe that the stories that we are getting told within Genshin Impact should be told in a much better manner. They are cool, like Fontaine was a wonderful story, but if I compare it to the main purpose, which was finding our lost sibling, then it's very unfortunate that it is told in this very unfortunate and very bad manner. At the beginning of the game, the story was told with a bunch of cutscenes that weren't just dialogue on dialogue like it is right now. And as we are getting farther and farther, we are getting less and less cutscenes and less cinematics. On the amount of dialogue, back in Mondstadt, we were getting much more cutscenes and cinematics than in Fontaine. But to be fair, Fontaine gave us real bangers of cinematics. And we are also getting much more characters. Cinematics, for example, just Arlecchino had like 4 or 5 cinematics as far as I remember, which didn't really happen during Mondstadt. We barely even got one for some characters, such as Diluc. He doesn't really have any teaser or trailer. Meanwhile, now we are getting teaser, trailer, and sometimes even some kind of short stories, like with Arlecchino, as I mentioned before. On top of that, we are unfortunately also getting black screen with just text. And let's be honest, that isn't the best way to tell a story. If you wanna have something like that, just put some nice art. Just imagine Lini and Furina arguing, and then there's just text that describes the situation, or whatever you want to have there. It would feel much more interesting, and it wouldn't be like reading white text on black background. It would feel more interesting. any story that we have within the game, it's a lot of bloat, there's no substance. We are not getting any information. Just imagine, you are trying to go for a drink and you invite a friend and he suddenly talks about his life purpose, what he did during the day and how he has to go to the shop to buy sausages and that he doesn't have enough money to buy the sausages, but you just wanted to know if he wants to go for a drink and that's about it. But he just said a lot of things that really doesn't answer the question. So yeah, that's basically how it feels most of the time. It just doesn't have the important bits that you want to know or that are part of the story. It almost feels like everything around the story is like 10% of what you read or what you listen to, and the rest is just bloat without any substance. The story feels like it doesn't really have too many consequences. Let me explain. We are going from nation to nation. We are helping every nation to fight against their problems. We subdued the prophecy in Fontaine. We helped Nahida regain her throne of power, let's just say, in Sumeru. We stopped Dottore. We helped rebellion in Inazuma. We found out who killed Rex Lapis and saved Lille Harper. And we have saved Mondstadt from the wrath of Dvalin. Yet, we still somehow lost, and that's because our archons lost their gnosis. They were either thrown away or part of some kind of contract or a deal. Yet, we also had situations like Scaramouche meddling with Irminsul or finishing Loom of Fate. I would assume that since Loom of Fate was teased from almost start of the game, finishing it would mean something. Yet, it seems like for now it will be a mystery. Just like with almost every other thing. Scaramouche deleted himself from Irminsul, and yet it doesn't even matter, maybe not to us, but who knows. I would say that the story should have some more consequences other than so Fatui won and they got another gnosis. Yeah, they lost Signora in process in Inazuma, but it was worth it because now they have 6 gnosis out of 7 and we don't know what that means. Same goes with Loom of Fate or whatever Scaramouche did in Irminsul, and I would say that's very unfortunate and I'd like to see some consequences of our actions because we are just mindlessly helping everybody and we are not thinking about what we actually do. Conclusions for Archon quests in Genshin are very rough, especially if we compare Fontaine and Penacone. Fontaine's conclusion was rough for one particular reason. You didn't get the full picture once you finish the Archon quest. You have to do Navia story quests, Furina story quests, and kinda you could say even Arlecchino story quest. And then you have events on top of that. And if you do the Archon quest, let's just say in patch 4.6, then you missed out on these events and you don't really have the full picture of how the story should be as a whole, which I believe is very unfortunate, and this FOMO isn't unknown to Genshin Impact. And I'll speak about events and their issues a bit later. Meanwhile, in Penacone, you just have another one Trailblaze mission that just is goofing around on a ship, waiting for peaceful negotiations and not the most interesting things in the world, but it offers some kind of conclusion, which Fontaine did not. Characters in Genshin are, I would say, in time bubble. They are not actually developing, they are not evolving, they are not devolving. There's nothing much that is going on with them. They are just existing in their own time bubble. Just look at Noelle. It's been almost 4 years and she still didn't pass the exam. She is still trying to get to the Knights of Favonius. It's like SpongeBob. SpongeBob failed getting his driving license for 30 years by now, I think. And he still didn't got it. It's like Noelle, if you really think about it. But on the other hand, we have characters that have very good character development. Some examples would be Furina, Raiden Shogun, Nahida, Scaramouche, and couple more. It feels kinda rough that only couple characters have some kind of development. But one thing really ties to this. certain situations within the story doesn't have the needed impact. Deaths that happen within the game are just of non-playable characters. So far we haven't seen anything really serious happen to playable character. We almost saw Xiao die at the end of Chasm's storyline, but at the end of the day he was saved through Deus Ex Machina by Zhongli. And by that point I really thought that Xiao's story is over and it would be a satisfying conclusion to his arc. After all, he is last of the Yaksha. He didn't need to continue. He accepted his fate basically. And if you really think about that, death such as Xiao's could be made as a great development for other Adepti or people of Liyue. Very similar thing could be done with Remine, who almost drowned during Fontaine Arc Conquest. And it could drive Lini and Lynette for further character development. Although I don't know how good that development could be when it comes to Liyue people and Adepti and Lini and Lynette. But I'd assume they would think of something, and that might be very interesting to see actually. Story quests and hangouts in Genshin are pretty much useless. Just look at the hangout I was talking about Noelle. It's just putting the character inside the time bubble and it doesn't really evolve the character that much, it just offers something to do and that's about it. Story quests are no different. Nothing really major happens inside them, it's just those characters are just confirming what we knew about them, that they are either useless or they are sleep deprived or anything. The interactions with other characters are either weak or non-existent and they don't really offer anything new. But there will be of course some exceptions to this, let's just say rule. In those hangout quests, when it comes to interactions between real playable characters, we might see 1 or 2 dialogues, but that's about it. Just imagine Layla. Her hangout is just confirming how sleep deprived, behind her studies and in need of help she is, while her other self finishes all her work. Just imagine if we saw Layla talking with Mona, as they both are astrologists and Layla is inspired by Mona. Mona is her great inspiration. And we could have some story beats about constellations and stars and something like that. Many people won't know what the fuck are they talking about, but the thing is that for lore nerds it would be really juicy stuff, or could be, but that's not what we are getting, unfortunately. Most of the story quests and hangouts feels like some kind of slice of life stories, which on one hand are whatever, but if every single one of them is like that, then it's kinda overused, which is something Genshin is very familiar with, as they are overusing certain archetypes, but I might talk about that in another video. Events are the greatest sin, I would say, in Genshin storytelling, because a lot of stories is told through the events, and people who just play through the Archon quests and don't do them because, wait, let's be honest, it's just FOMO, they miss out on a bunch of juicy stuff, such as Albedo, and even some development for Ito. Even could be Sino, perceived very differently. Because let's be honest, Sino in Archon Quest is very much different from what we saw in events. And it's kinda unfortunate. And since we still don't have the possibility of replaying old events, then bunch of interesting stories, such as Albedo, is getting left out, which, let's be honest, is very much unfortunate. And it removes some interesting aspects from the game. And what is the point of a story game that is removing its story from itself? The FOMO is very much unfortunate, but there's nothing we can do. Like, we lost so much story beats that could be very cool. To this day I hear that Albedo's questline in Dragon's Spine was wonderful. It had amazing storytelling and especially it showed Albedo as complex character, which outside of the event you don't really see. Genshin overall has very much underused possibilities. From top of my head, imagine if we are going further and further as we are going to Natlan, and since Loom of Fate is finished, but we almost got all the Gnosis, we saw more aggressive behavior from both factions. For example, Hillagers and Abyss could be encroaching on all the capital cities of all nations, and they could do some harm or something. Maybe it feels odd, but to me it feels like now we can see the world doing something. It's not like they are existing somewhere and they are hiding. They now have reason to be more and more aggressive as the Abyss finally finished Loom of Fate. Although we don't know what that means. Same goes with Fatui having 6 Gnosis. So far for us it is mostly chess pieces, but in the future we might find out that we are in danger. But let's be honest, that's something we will find out in the future, or we actually may not find out at all. And with that being said, I'd like to hear your opinions about other flaws you found out in Genshin Impact, and overall, what do you think about Genshin's story? And if you like this video, please let me know by liking the video or disliking, and don't forget to press subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next one. And mostly, don't forget to have fun. See ya.